So you're playing Genshin, you do a 10 pull, and while you don't get a 5-star, you do get 4-star Dahlia. Now, what do you get with Dahlia besides the newest 4-star in Genshin? Well, Dahlia is a sword-wielding Hydro user who is our first Hydro shielder in Genshin. In this video, we're going to look at the basics of Dahlia. So Dahlia being our first Hydro shielder in Genshin, I'm sure that everybody had kind of high hopes or expectations from Dahlia. So at the end of the video, I'm going to ask you what your thoughts are on Dahlia, and I'm going to try to remain unbiased and unopinionated and not really talk about how I feel about Dahlia because I want to hear everybody else's opinion. Now, before we get into his kit though, I do want to talk about his skill a little bit because it has an interaction where it does one thing to enemies and something else if you or somebody on your team or in co-op or whatever touches the skill. So his skill is going to have a tap and a hold, but it's just going to place this mark on the ground. And if your player or somebody in like co-op touches it, it is going to do an instance of Hydro damage as well as send them up into the air. So I just wanted to show that before I had some enemies pop up because it's a little bit harder to show when enemies are present. So now that that's out of the way, let's go look at it. So his normal attacks are going to do physical damage. They're going to be pretty normal. There's nothing really special about them. And his skill, we already talked about what happens if one of our characters touch it. His skill is going to put this mark on the ground, whether you use a tap or a hold. The tap just kind of lets you aim it. Whenever an enemy hits it, it is going to explode, dealing AoE Hydro damage. That's really it for his skill. It's kind of just a way to do Hydro damage and produce energy because his real part of his kit, or the more important part of his kit, is going to come through his burst. But before we look at his burst, let me talk about how the stacking mechanic kind of works and then his passives. So with his passive, you have these stacking mechanics that will kind of refresh something that happens in his burst. And there are a couple of ways to get it. One of which is going to be if your on-field character does 4 normal attacks to the enemies, then that will give a stack to Dahlia. The other way is going to be after triggering one of his passives. So let's go look at his passives. The first passive, whenever a character affected by the effect given to him by his burst triggers a frozen reaction, it will give him 2 stacks. So we can get 1 stack from doing 4 normal attacks with our on-field character, 2 stacks from causing a freeze reaction. So that kind of hints to what kind of teams you may want to run him in. His second passive is going to be whenever your active party member is affected by his burst, their attack speed will be increased based on his max HP. This effect maxes out at 40,000 HP on Dahlia, so just keep that in mind. So now let's look at the actual burst. The actual burst is going to do an instance of Hydro damage and give us a shield. The shield does stay on the field even if we swap to other characters. And those stacks that we were talking about, the Favonian Favor, if the shield breaks, it will use one of these stacks to grant another shield. So you can see inside the shield these little marks that are kind of rotating around in the shield. This is how many of the Favonian Favor stacks Dahlia has from either normal attacks from our on-field character or from causing a frozen reaction like we're doing with Changyu. So yeah, as you can see, we have about 3 stacks in here kind of swinging around. If this shield were to break, then it would just produce another shield. And I actually did it. I stood in front of this ruin guard, got slapped, it broke, used up one of the Favonian Favors, and immediately granted me another Hydro shield. So we want to make sure that whenever we're using him, we are getting these stacks onto Dahlia so that way whenever the shield breaks, it can just be refreshed. So with Dahlia being a 4-star, I do want to take a moment to look at his constellations because you might be thinking right now, Kessie, there's not a lot in his kit as far as Hydro application. So maybe, just maybe, if we look at his constellations, then it will fix some of the lackluster Hydro application. So his C1 is going to reduce his energy requirement. A lot of his utility comes from his burst. This is just going to reduce his energy requirements by giving him some elemental energy back. Number 2 is just going to increase the shield strength of the shield that is produced by his burst. Number 3 is going to be a standard one. Number 4 is going to make his burst last for 3 more seconds. Number 5 is going to be a standard one. Number 6 is going to be that if your active character is under the effects of his burst and they die, it will restore them to full health. It's Barbara's C6 with a little bit of attack speed thrown in there. So, did his constellations fix his seemingly lackluster Hydro application? I'll let you be the judge of that. Now let's talk about artifacts and weapons. In this trial, he was using Noblesse. Now Noblesse is going to be a good option for Dahlia because you're going to want to use them in freeze teams, right? You're going to want to make sure that you have a way to freeze the enemy. Benny, especially C6 Benny, may not be usable in something like a freeze team. So having a Noblesse user in a team that wants that attack buff, which this team definitely does, on a character whose utility is based on their burst is a phenomenal option. So Noblesse is going to be really good for him. If you want to try and just do like more like a shield bot, then you can run like 2-piece HP, being 2-piece nasty, 2-piece VG, something like that. And for the main stats, you're most likely going to be running HP across the board because you're going to be getting your energy recharge from his weapon. Could you run an HP sword on Dahlia? Yes, but it would be wasting ki and it would be wasting Doc's Hand's assist. I'm unbiased. So instead, you're most likely going to be running something like Sacrificial Sword or Favonius Sword instead of an HP. This is going to give him energy recharge, so that way you can run HP across the board on your main stats for your artifacts, but still have enough energy recharge on him to be able to use his burst off of cooldown. Could you use something like the Fontaine Fishing Weapon? You could, but I think it would be wasted. Just go with Favonius or go with Sacrificial. Getting that second skill reset would be okay because it would allow him to do a little bit more Hydro application. I am unbiased. So let me know down in the comments what you think of Dahlia's kit. Were you happy that this is our very first and only Hydro Shielder in all of Genshin? Are you pleased with this character's kit? Do you love Dahlia so much that you're going to C6 him and run him to his fullest potential? Let me know down in the comments. There's a reason I stopped pulling on this banner. That's going to be it for this video. Cookie has green hair, I have purple hair, and I will see you in the next one.